You've seen how threatening the Chinese dictatorship is, not just to its own people, not just to Hong Kong, the way it's been threatening us, threatening Canada, threatening Vietnam, India, the Philippines, Japan, now threatening even war against Taiwan, an invasion, and practicing for it too. I've said several times, we've been caught with our pants down. We've been caught unprepared for a war that could break out within the next 5 years, says, say, very reputable analysts. A war just to our north. Now, we now have a military that's been tooled up, in fact, to fight different kinds of wars, to make a small contribution to operations in, say, the Middle East, not to fight a war right here against something like China. And Defence Minister Peter Dutton, who's relatively new in that job, now seems like a man in a hell of a hurry. He's flying next week to the United States. He says he wants the US to pool its know-how and resources to help us develop new long-range strike weapons, long range, and things like swarming drones. These sound exactly like weapons you would in fact need against China. Joining me is the country's top foreign affairs writer, and it's an author too, Greg Sheridan of The Australian. Greg, thank you for your time. Look, to me, this sounds like a good move. I'm interested in your view, but it seems also a move that is years too late.
Well, Andrew, great to be with you. I agree with you on both counts. It's a very good move. It's 10 or 15 years too late, and we've got to see whether the government follows through on it. A lot of things are announced in defence and they never actually happen. Our Defence Force is structured to move troops to East Timor and to fight counterinsurgencies alongside the United States in Afghanistan. It has no relevance at all to the problems that we face. We're going to spend $40 billion on armoured vehicles for the Army. Guess what? You cannot use an armoured vehicle in the South China Sea. The new things that we're buying, the frigates and the submarines, don't begin to arrive until the mid-2030s, and they don't completely arrive until the 2050s. But what we have to understand is that compared to China, we are a weak power and they are a strong power. The way weak powers hurt strong powers is through what the boffins call asymmetric warfare. In other words, tens, hundreds, thousands of little weapons which we can afford to lose. Like these new frigates are going to cost $3 billion each. We're only going to have a few of them. We're never going to risk losing them. But with drones and missiles, you can swarm an enemy. This is what the Chinese have done to the Americans. So you don't want 200 long-range anti-ship missiles, which Scott Morrison announced about 18 months ago. We still don't have them, by the way. You want about 20,000 of them. You want 40,000 missiles in Australia's north. You want swarms and swarms of cheap drones, Azerbaijan recently defeated Armenia in a war. Armenia had tanks. Azerbaijan had drones of the sort that you can just about buy at Bunnings. And because it could send out thousands of them, enough got through to do the damage. Now, we've thought of ourselves as a great first world technological power, as a unit of the United States. We need to think of ourselves as an independent nation of 26 million, and how can we raise the cost to a potential aggressor, namely China?
Mate, this is just absolutely frightening. I mean, you pointed to a mistake so basic with the submarines project that I could not believe, even as untutored in this area, I could not believe we committed to subs, the last of which we would not get until 2050, 30, 40 years later from the time that the thing was announced. It's like saying to, Hitler, can you just wait on until, the end of the century before invading Poland, because we're not ready yet. I mean, it's just such a joke. Now, if we don't have these subs coming for another, 30, 35 years, how much time do we actually have before you think we will need to have a credible armoury in the field?
Well, we need a credible armoury straight away. We have no strategic warning time. I mean, Biden has shown himself to be incredibly weak, but America has tremendous regenerative power, and they are at last turning their minds militarily to how they should deal with the Chinese. So Xi Jinping could well decide his window of opportunity is in the next 5 years. Now, there are things we can do. First of all, of course, we get the first sub in 2033 or 34. The only reason it takes us another 20 years to get the next 12 is because we have idiotically decided that to have a continuous ship build, we're only going to build one every 2 years. You know, the British built 400 Spitfires in a year at the start of World War II. We could build a sub every year or more if we wanted to, and that's what we should do once they start arriving. But in the meantime, a lot of things we can do. We're going to upgrade the combat system on the Collins, and then we should put Tomahawk missiles on the Collins. Tomahawks are big, bad missiles. They've got a long range. You can hurt your enemy. You can't hurt him enough, but you can hurt him a good bit. Being able to hurt him a bit is better than not being able to hurt him at all. We should get long-range ground-launched missiles that we can launch from our north. We can get these things quickly. 18 months ago, the government announced an initiative to build missiles in Australia. Fabulous, fabulous. I wrote front-page editorials saying, you beauty, great government. So far, the Defence Department has done nothing about this except suck its thumb. It finally put out a request for interest from Australian industry a couple of months ago, and it got 130 replies, and it's going to go through, 50,000 interdepartmental committees. And by the time our grandchildren are getting married, Andrew, they may actually have a plan of action. No. Because we haven't had a defence minister for years. It was contemptible that Scott Morrison appointed Linda Reynolds. Nice woman, but completely out of her depth. Yeah. It was absurd that Malcolm Turnbull appointed Maurice Payne. There has been no one at the shop until Dutton arrived. He's got to take them now by the scruff of their neck and say, look, we're not going to design unique missiles in Australia. All we want is the Americans to allow us to build their missiles in Australia right now so that we can build hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them and have lots and lots of them, and we'll pay the Americans royalties and all the rest of it. And then when we've got 20 or 30,000 missiles, anybody, including China, says, well, they would inflict a lot of damage on us if we tangled with them. At the moment, we couldn't do anything.
It makes so much sense. And I tell you what, I come over with this warm, fuzzy feeling of moral superiority that Australia did not build itself a nuclear bomb. I feel so much warmer for it. Unfortunately, though, I also think, gosh, we might have been a little bit safer if we had one to hang over the Chinese head. But anyway, that's for another. I'm just a warmonger. Greg, the Taliban has just announced its new government. All of them men, lots of them hardliners. In fact, the Interior Minister is a man wanted by the FBI for terrorism. Now, what does this new ministry tell you?
Well, the Taliban haven't changed their stripes. So I think the way Biden did this was maximum damage to the United States. By the way, incidentally, I agree with you about nuclear weapons. We could have another good discussion about that sometime. Taiwan had a nuclear weapons program, and the Americans talked them into getting rid of it, saying, we'll always guarantee you security. Now, if the Americans leave them in the lurch, that's a terrible historical betrayal. The Taliban victory is a tremendous victory for terrorists, a tremendous blow to American prestige. Biden left something like $88 billion worth of military equipment behind. The Taliban is a much better equipped military force now than the Australian Army is, but we're not going back to fight them on the land. We need very tough counter-terrorism capabilities. The danger from terrorism has just gone up, but still the number one threat to us is China. But now we have to cope with an increased terrorism threat and the geostrategic danger of China. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that Russia, Iran, China, and the terrorists all coordinate in some kind of, concerted anti-Western push. And, the only, in the Marvel superheroes movie, Iron Man said, we've got one thing that they don't get. And the person said to him, what's that? And he said, we've got the Hulk. Well, our Hulk is the United States of America. But at the moment, our Hulk is in his Bruce Banner mode, He's gone out of his big green monster mode into his warm, cuddly mode, and that's very dangerous. And that it makes it all the more important that we ought to have our independent capabilities.
So true, Greg. And it's not just Bruce Banner mode, it's Bruce Banner in a Zimmer frame. But never mind that. Greg Sheridan, thank you so much for your time.